Have you contacted Fox?
Is it still a dress code?
Yes.
Actually, I think we're not sure if there's still a dress code. The last thing I've heard about the air marshals is there's now, apparently they've always sat in first class for some reason, which we've known for a long time. It wasn't generally public knowledge. Even though most of the threat would probably come from further back in the plane. And so now there's a movement afoot to try to get air marshals to sit in coach, and there's some resistance to that.
And there's kind of a de facto dress code still, as we understand. It's been told to us from different sources that the official edict is there's no dress code, but then there are still the field offices that are run by special agents in charge, and that becomes their de facto fiefdom. So if that agent feels that, no, you need to be in military grooming standards because that's what I know and respect, then it's in effect.
Also, have you contacted Fox?
Fox, in what regard?
I guess.
Well,
Fox News.
They don't really. They're a news station, so they don't really represent a distribution channel. And we have representatives that are out there actively trying to solicit the various distribution arrangements for us. And in effect, we're now out of the loop. We just kind of learn of this stuff and go, oh, that's cool.
Just to be on there to interview you, they would show bits of your film.
We have had that earlier on when we first launched or released the film back in July. We were on a program called Fox and Friends for a whopping 3.5 minutes, and but any exposure is good exposure when you're trying to take something like this and just broaden the circle.
And to that point, if I may, as one who's in the broadcasting industry, usually by people making phone calls to the producers of either the radio or TV shows, that sometimes gets their attention too. I think there's another question right up over your shoulder up there.
Well, it's not really a question, it's really comments. These are just correlations from my experiences that it's just amazing. When you talk about the dress code of the air marshals, I used to work in an embassy in Africa, and the diplomatic couriers who were carrying the sensitive information were so easy to spot. Well, they had white guys on a plane that was all black people going back to Africa who sat in business or first class. Well, there's a whole lot of wars go on in Africa, and the Americans supposedly try to broker those wars. Actually, they're on one side or the other. And those people knew who was carrying the information. And in fact, one time the courier bag got lost and the negotiations were affected. So that's a thing from the past. But there's all kinds of, especially foreigners who look at these things, look at them a lot differently than I think we as Americans do. Those conspiracy theories that we kind of say, oh, that's extremist or that's crazy, that's not true. But is it the government instilling fear in the citizenry, making them paranoid? They put it towards a particular ethnic group who they want to have a war with. It's their political means to have their political agenda to keep the American population fearful of these, now it's the Middle Eastern. It's part of the way of military, giving justification for military spending. You've got Halliburton and Dick Cheney with the military complex. It's a support for a system under which we live. If you don't have war, you don't have that whole system. So that gets thrown around a lot in other countries. And then this issue of profiling. Well, I was in the Soviet Union as a 20-year-old, and there were very, very, very few American tourists. So it was a system of their profiling against us that they assigned in tourist guides to us. Well, they didn't fool anybody. They didn't fool their own citizens. They didn't fool us. They were incompetent. It was obvious as to who they were. I mean, they lost me several times. Those were uneducated people who were, they were purposefully picked to be given these jobs, and the bureaucracy was huge. The citizenry questioned the whole purpose of that as well. It was pure theater, and here we're doing the same thing under a government that collapsed from within because the citizenry finally realized what the heck was going on, who had the money in the country, who were the fat cats that were benefiting from the system. It's amazing. But one of the things that didn't get addressed also that jumps out at me is you haven't talked at all about the U.S. government's force on other governments to do what their sovereign states decided not to do, which was react to this in such a fearful manner to make their own citizenry paranoid. Canada, for example. Canada has been forced by the Bush administration to be almost as paranoid as the United States, and the Canadian people fight against the spending that goes on their border. And if you remember, we kept pointing the finger at the terrorists that came through Canada, ignoring the ones that came through here, and there's no way to prevent them from coming in anyway. There really isn't. All the ports are empty. I mean, empty of security.
Well, you've covered about 6 or 7 topics at least. I mean, I agree with most of what you're saying. I know from aviation in general, there's been a move with FAA to standardize to the world, and those of us who were brought up thinking in Fahrenheit now have to conceptualize centigrade and everything else. So this is part of a much bigger picture in some respects. I do happen to know that Europe in particular hates the fact that we've imposed all this on them. But again, folks, just, because I see a lot of people starting to leave, will ask your question, but just before you all disappear, I mean, I don't think right now it could matter less whether whether this agency was conceived under Bush Cheney or Obama or could have been conceived back in the Clinton era. It doesn't matter. We're stuck with it. And they understand what they have to do, and they're trying to grow their empire. And Congress is fearful of this shibboleth. It's too hot to touch. An individual congressman does not particularly want to stand out and deep six or participate in changing something that could result in his demise tomorrow morning with the reporters up front if something happens. We are part of this government too. Let's not forget it, because if we do, we're going to lose it all pretty soon. We have got to get a hold of our congressional reps, and we've got to fax them, we've got to email them, we've got to write them and tell them, please. You've seen Please Remove Your Shoes. You're not as stupid as they think. And we're going to have to reconstruct this whole system while we have a moment of peace and quiet, because believe me, if we have another incident, nobody's going to be able to think straight. And we're just going to lose more freedoms and have more expense and have more of the same. This is a very opportune time. Please help us out.
I did just want to say that I think you're right that people in other countries are getting kind of fed up. We came back from Ireland in May, and we weren't asked to take our shoes off. Nobody took their shoes off. And I just got this sense that everybody was pretty fed up with this.
Well, I guess it's humorous, the guy lived, but on a more humorous note, I did read one isolated event of a German who was asked to confiscate his bottle of vodka in Nuremberg because of the liquids rule, and he had a German fit. and proceeded to drink a fifth of vodka in front of the security crew. Wasn't going to let him have it, and then they had to take him away in an ambulance.
I think there was one more question back over here by the wall. No? Okay. Let's see. Yeah, back up in the corner.
As the philosopher, if you were the philosopher kings, would you have the security system the present security system in the airport stand down? And while you laid out some general concepts of local control, decentralized control, local decision making, what would that entail? How would the security system look different going through the airport for us if you were the philosopher kings?
Oh boy, Rudy Maxa threw that one on me, but he said if you were a dictator, and I didn't like being a dictator.
The philosopher kings are much more genial. All wise and all knowing. That's why I used the term.
Okay, my idea of security by Fred. First of all, as a piece of ancient history, before 9/11, our security cost us approximately $250 to $500 million a year. It's now costing $8 billion. The first thing I would do would be to cut this whole mess to a fraction of its current size and reinstate the notion of having the federal government in a supervisory position and reinstate private screeners. We have a lot of people now who don't qualify as far as I'm concerned, but there's some good people in government and they could reapply for that. I can't overemphasize the importance of intelligence, and we don't have an awful lot of that, unfortunately. I'm sure most of you have read about the Washington Post series this summer. Anybody read about the intelligence community discovery? But that too has become bloated and just out of line. That's a big job by itself. The Office of Director of National Intelligence, a fellow named Blair got fired after the Christmas bombing attempt. But I'm holding out some hope for that. I mean, that was the recommendation of the 9/11 Commission. This is the office that's supposed to be able to connect the dots as relate to aviation security. I think the comment in the movie about decentralizing, which is frequently a benefit, is just enabling people who have some brains, so we've got to hire some better people, to make some snap decisions on their own. I mean, this is in line with the way the Israeli system works. So I don't have a problem with that, but I think we've got a lot of people in the system that shouldn't be there. I mean, to go